Rewind of the Living Dead is a review show, so spoilers are ahead.
Director Neil Marshall came away from making his iconic werewolf flick, Dog Soldiers, feeling like he didn't actually produce a particularly scary movie. Instead, he saw the film as more of a black comedy, so he wanted to make something totally different and completely terrifying. Marshall had always been fascinated with the idea of setting a film in a cave, and his script actually started with a central focus on a single character dealing with the tragic loss of her family and an eventual descent into madness with the film titled The Dark. He began fleshing out a more fully realized idea and decided to build his film around an all-female cast, which was a rarity in horror, and he drew inspiration from films like Deliverance, The Shining, and The Thing when putting the finishing touches on his screenplay about a group of friends exploring a cave and the unknown dangers that are lurking around every corner.
Now just give me a smile.
Juno, are you sure we're going the right way?
I've never been lost in my life. There's only one way out of this chamber, and that's down the pipe.
I'm stuck. I can't breathe. Okay, Sarah, you have to calm down. I'm coming back. Okay? Okay. Okay, move! Now! Now! This is not good, guys.
Can we get out of here? Which way?
I don't know.
Sarah said she saw someone back
So
there.
what?
I don't think I saw someone. I saw someone. No, you heard something and you saw what you wanted to see. It's the dark. It plays tricks on people. Please! Is there anybody there?
In the latest episode of Rewind of the Living Dead, we're going to keep our flashlights charged and try not to make a sound as we review the 2005 film, The Descent. Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, this week we are diving into, no pun intended, diving into a film, and I know this is a review podcast, but this is a film that came out in 2005, so it's 18 years old at this point. So when I say I'm bearing the lead here by giving my initial review up front, honestly, Patrick, this is one of the few films I can seriously say scared the living hell out of me when I saw it the first time. Yes, we are talking about The Descent.
It just hurts that it's 18 years ago. It is something that is, I feel now is in my distant memory, but when you start to put it in perspective, that it's like, oh yeah, like somebody who was born that year is now a legal adult who could vote. It's just like, shit, like where is the time going? Because The Descent at the time, I think fucking rocked people. Like it was a special movie, great campaign. I don't know if you remember, I remember being in New York City and seeing on plasters in the subways the skull picture, and it's all the women's bodies and all stuff. It's just fucking cool, Damon. Like The Descent was, it was something like I was really waiting for, and I didn't even have the reference at the time. I wasn't like super stuck on like horror filmmakers at the time. I never connected that it was the same filmmaker from Dog Soldiers. I just knew like I want to see that. I want to see whatever the fuck that is. But Damon, this is the holiday season. This is the season that people give wonderful things to their friends. So I wanted to recognize something right now because I got this in the mail, Damon. And for any of our YouTube listeners who are seeing this right now, this is a Jason mask signed by Kane Hodder from one of my very best friends in the whole world, Damon Martin, got this. The horror aficionado himself certified this, signed by Kane Hodder, and it is now in my possession. This is absolute gold in this household. This is worth as much as unobtainium, Damon. This is incredible stuff. I want to thank you during this Friendsgiving Eve, season for this wonderful gift. I just wanted to take a second out of our podcast to recognize your friendship and this absolutely wonderful piece of collectible that I will never part from. This is very important to me.
I'm very happy that you got it. It's funny because when it comes to the two of us, like, I'm a collector. Like, you can look behind me if you're on YouTube and you can see I'm a collector. I have my Talk to Me hand, which I just got recently, is up there. I got my Art the Clown mask.
You have Art the Clown.
I am a very big collector, and you are the exact opposite.
You can see the wall behind me is completely empty.
You are very much a minimalist, so you do not collect anything. But I was, the one thing I knew that you absolutely loved is Friday the 13th, and the one actor I knew you absolutely adored was Kane Hodder as Jason Voorhees. So when I went to a horror convention, shout out to Scarefest down in Lexington, Kentucky. I was down there a few weeks ago. Kane Hodder was making an appearance, and I stood in the line, super nice guy. And they were selling Jason masks, and they were getting signed by Jason. And so I had to get it. And I got him to sign it directly to you, to Patrick. And I think he actually wrote on there the number of the films he was in, even at that.
That's right. I need to know, but yes, he did do that, just in case I didn't know. But yeah, this is the season of giving, and Damon gave a gift that I will treasure quite literally forever. I'm probably going to request to be buried in this. I'm going to just put this on my face and, stick some sort of a metal rod through my chest so the lightning strikes and I may rise again as Jason Voorhees.
Yeah, so that's you're not a collector, but I knew that was something that you would collect. So I'm glad.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. So speaking about tonight's movie, The Descent, I don't remember the campaign like you do. I can't, because I know I didn't see this in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
I know I saw it afterwards, and this was one of those word of mouth films, very much like Dog Soldiers, which is another
right.
which we have reviewed. Which when we reviewed that film at the time, we did it during our Werewolf Month a couple years ago, and I had always said coming into that Silver Bullet, the Stephen King adaptation, was probably my favorite werewolf movie. By the end of that month, and reviewing Dog Soldiers, I'm like, you know what? I think Dog Soldiers might actually be number one now. Not that it's like a bad list to be number 1 and 2 on, but for me, I was like, man, Dog Soldiers is so good. Like, I think that might actually be my favorite werewolf film now. Here we are a couple years later, and we're reviewing the next film from director Neil Marshall, The Descent. So I don't remember how I heard about this, but it definitely was word of mouth. People, you got to see The Descent. You got to watch this movie. So I definitely remember watching it for the first time. I definitely remember dropping the lights late at night, put it on, and it scared the ever-loving shit out of me when I saw it the first. There were so many legitimately terrifying moments in this film, and I think what sets this film apart from a lot of other great horror films, Patrick, and there are great jump scares in this movie, make no mistake about it.
Oh, yeah.
But this is, I think I texted you this when I was watching. I was like, I think this might be the most anxiety-inducing film ever. And the reason I say that is, if you've seen The Descent, again, we're in spoiler territory. The movie's 18 years old. The creatures, when they show up about 3/4 of the way through the movie, now that's when the true, really terrifying, bloody, gory horror starts, right? But the lead up to that, just them spelunking through a cave is utterly terrible. Like, there's so much anxiety in those opening scenes of them diving into the cave that to me is it's the definition of a terrifying film when you're not even to the part that's supposed to be the horror. The horror is when the weird cave creatures show up. The 45 minutes before that are still utterly terrifying, and I was like, anxiety-induced, just fright. Like, there's no better way to describe it.
This movie, pucker factor of 11, right? We've talked about the pucker factor before on this podcast. The pucker refers to your butthole, if you don't know what I'm talking about. I did see this in the theater. Again, I was very drawn in by the campaign. Their marketing totally worked on me. I went to go see it. Damon, when you're locked in a theater with a 100-foot screen in front of you, and that first 45 minutes of the movie is spelunking, and let me tell you something. Uh, it was full pucker. Nothing was getting out of there. Nothing was coming in. Nothing was going out. Because when you're locked into that theater experience where everything's black around you and this screen is in front of you, it was disorienting. It was claustrophobic. It was suffocating. And that's 45 minutes of the movie of a 90-minute movie. Half of the movie is just clenching your butthole so tightly because caving fucking terrifying. It just is. Being in a cave is a terrifying thing. A lot of people do it as an adrenaline rush. And you meet this group of women, Sarah, played by Shauna McDonald, Juno, played by Natalie Mendoza, Beth, played by Alex Reed, Rebecca, played by Saskia Mulder, Sam, played by Mayanna Buring, and Holly, played by Nora Jane Noon. They're adventure seekers. This is what they do for fun. You meet them in this cold open that is a whitewater rafting situation, which I believe was just Sarah and Juno, if I'm not mistaken.
It was Sarah, Juno, and one other one. I think it was Beth. It was the three of them, and then her husband Paul,
and her husband, right? Yeah,
Sarah's husband Paul, and their daughter Jessica.
Yeah. So you meet them; they're adventurers just to start with, and of course, in the cold open, we kind of understand Sarah's plight a little bit because right after that wonderful little white water rafting trip, she loses her husband and her daughter in a tragic car accident that she has to witness, and it absolutely rocks her. But a year later, it's always a year later, by the way. I notice that now. It's all like I'm the pattern is very clear. 1 year later, her and her friends have decided it's time to have another adventure. And Juno puts everybody together, brings in some extra gals, and they say, let's go out to the Appalachians. Because Damon, when you and I vacation, we say Appalachians first. but if you're a caver,
and I live near the Appalachian, like I am in that area. I'm in Ohio. I'm right near the Appalachian Mountains, so I know exactly where this is supposed to take place. Although, to be fair, it was actually all filmed in a sound studio in London, and the outside shots were filmed in Scotland. So none of this was actually filmed but it takes place in the Appalachians, which is, yes, there's a lot of caves and a lot of things like that can happen here. It's so funny because it does look like I live in that area. I've driven through there many times, and looking at it, I would say it looks pretty accurate. Like, it looks very accurate to the Appalachian Mountains where they're at. When I heard they filmed it in Scotland, I was like, damn, they did a really good job of, showing that off as what it was supposed to look like.
The Appalachians, often the setting for horror in horror movies or not horror movies. Hello, Deliverance. You know what I mean? Like, this heavily wooded, heavily hilled areas on the eastern side of the United States. And of course, cavers would love the Appalachians because it's just littered with caves. There's tons of them. And yeah, Damon, you spend the first 45 minutes. I remember sitting in that theater just absolutely with my throat closed. My butthole was clenched so tight it was choking me. And because the way, and Neil Marshall's a fantastic visual director. The way he moves that camera through these caves, the angles he chooses create maximum dread. That is what you're feeling before you ever hear the slight childish giggle of one of these fucking little ghouls that live in this cave. You are just scared to shit that you're going to be stuck in this cave. Like, you're going to get stuck in it some way, somehow. And then the horror hits. And it's these are great creatures. We don't do a ton of creature features on here, weirdly enough. This is a creature feature, and they were just so simple. I think is because, and tell me if on this latest viewing you didn't get the alien vibe, like big time, like aliens. Like,
what's really funny you say that. So I was watching when I did the trailer for the episode tonight, which you heard at the intro, and I cut it down a little bit. It's like 2.5 minutes. I cut it down to like 1:20. When you watch it, they always have flashes of like reviews in there, when they're trying to build up a horror film that nobody's seen yet, they always try to get a couple early reviews in there. And one of the early reviews was the scariest creature film since Alien was one of the reviews. And I was like, because I was already thinking that in watching it this latest time, I was like, you know what? This movie really does share a lot of DNA with Alien and Aliens to a certain extent. Because,
yeah, definitely.
In Alien, you're dealing with one alien, and Aliens, you're dealing with a ton of aliens. So it's kind of like a little bit of both in this film. And yeah, I definitely got Alien vibes from this movie.
Yeah, it very much. And by the way, Alien and Aliens, two of the best movies you'll ever watch. Like, just period. So the fact that you're mentioned in the breadth of those movies says a lot about your film. Damon, that first viewing to this viewing now, right? Now, I think we do this often, and we're going to do it a lot during the holiday season because we're going to be revisiting a lot of stuff. First impression back in the day, second impression now that we're reviewing it for the show.
So first impression back in the day, it was, I would say, one of the top 5 scariest films I've ever seen the first time. And in particular, and this is not a spoiler for when we get into categories, because this actually isn't my favorite scare, but the scene where Sarah gets stuck in that little tiny tunnel, crawling through to get to the other side. That scene had me almost hyperventilating the first time. And to be fair, I'm not like a claustrophobic person by nature. Like, I'm not. Like, when I go on roller coasters or you go in places where you're in tight spaces, things like that, that doesn't really, I'm a personal space guy. Like, I don't like to be touched. And when I'm around large crowds of people and it's just large crowds of people, I do like kind of want to get out of there, but I'm not a claustrophobic person by nature. Like, I don't get in an elevator with 20 people and like start sweating. Like, that doesn't do it. But that scene when they're crawling through that tiny ass little tunnel and they're literally just gut crawling through there, and then Sarah gets stuck. Nightmare inducing right there. Hyper, like, that was like panic attack at that moment. So top 5, one of the top 5 scare. And again, we're not just films ever. It starts as soon as they get in that cave, and it doesn't end until Sarah escapes, which we'll actually talk about that later in the 2 endings for this movie.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, top 5. I've seen it a dozen times since then. It's one of my favorites. Rewatching it this time, I have the Blu-ray because I wanted to watch the special features, because I was like, I've read a lot about this movie. I like Neil Marshall a lot. He directed a couple of my favorite Game of Thrones episodes. They're really iconic. So I was like, I like Neil Marshall. I want to talk about the visuals of this movie in a little bit. But I wanted to see the behind-the-scenes stuff and the interviews and the how making of, because I wanted to just better understand as we get ready to do this podcast. Rewatching it this last time, not only does it hold up, but a lot of the scares that I absolutely knew were coming, that I absolutely knew were happening, still got me. That scene of them getting through that little tunnel, that scene of, is it Beth or is it's Beth or is it Rebecca that's crawling on the ceiling when they have to attach the hooks to crawl across the big cavern. I've seen this movie a dozen times. Those 2 scenes in particular at the start of the film still had me at a pucker factor of 11, still had me in near panic attack mode, and I've seen this movie a dozen times. It's a remarkable feat for a movie that you love, that you've seen this many times, that it can still have that effect on you. So I don't have a number in my head, Patrick. I don't have a list to throw out at you, but I'd be hard pressed to find that this isn't one of the top 5 scariest movies ever for me personally, because it holds up. It holds up over time. Because a lot of the scares in this movie yes, there are great jump scares. And when the creatures come out, it gets pretty horrifying, gore. And I mean, there's a lot of just traditional horror moments.
Yeah.
But just those 2 scenes in particular I talk about at the beginning, those are anxiety-inducing moments. They're not like, ooh, on the edge of my seat, scared there's something around the corner.
Yeah.
I'm in a tunnel and I can't get out. I'm climbing over a giant cavern, and if I slip and fall, I'm dead. Those 2 scenes in particular still 18 years later get me. So this is, I know, I don't know if I've ever used this term on this podcast. We've raved about a lot of movies on here. We did the original Scream, which is maybe top 3 horror movie for me all time because it's just such a monumental part of my past. I might go as far as to say, Patrick, this is a perfect horror film. This is everything I could want in a horror film. And we'll get into like the nuances of it as we go on, but like the fact that it scared me in 2005 and it continues to scare me 18 years later says a lot about this movie.
You might, there might not be any hyperbole there, Damon. I mean, I'm looking at my list right now because I document every scare and every gore that in this case, it was scares and gores. The kills are sort of like part of the gore. So I didn't separate them out this time. It's a lot. And this is a 90-minute movie and it takes place in a cave. And there's a lot on my list, tons of stuff on my list for the scares and the gores. It's impressive. And you're right, it does hold up. And a couple of the scares still got me. A couple of them did. I've never had to quantify it. And maybe at some point down the line, we should actually rank our scariest movies of all time. But I'd be hard pressed to put this outside of the top 10. I don't know for sure. I haven't really considered my list.
I don't know. I don't know either.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, but yeah.
But when I think about how it hit, and I remember at the time, my girlfriend, now wife, was obsessed with this movie, loved it. It's a great female empowerment movie anyway, on top of all of that. But terrified the shit out of her. And it's got a rewatch factor of fucking 11 too, on top of your pucker factor. If you got diarrhea, watch this movie because ain't nothing coming out. You know what I mean? You're too clenched up. You just can't. It's stress inducing. There's almost and Neil Marshall, I think, just has this quality to him, but there's almost like a French extremist vibe to his movies a little bit, in a really weird way.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I feel it a lot in this movie. A lot. It shares DNA with Martyrs. In a really weird way, even though it's totally different. It couldn't be further from it. But it's intensely gory. It's intensely stress inducing. It's intensely scary when it needs to be scary. It's violent when it needs to be violent. And then there's the story. The really kind of the what's holding this whole story together is the relationship between Sarah and Juno. Because way back when they were whitewater rafting, and they got to the finish line, and Sarah's husband's there, and he's clapping, and the daughter's there, and Sarah gets off the boat, and she gives him a hug and a kiss, and Juno just has this look. It's so subtle, but she just looks their way with a little bit of jealousy, anger a little bit, and I think it was Beth who kind of caught the look. It was obvious. They didn't need to say anything. Juno had an affair, was having an affair with her husband. And I don't think they ever actually say it. I mean, I know that Juno and it might be Juno and Beth, where Juno admits Sarah wasn't the only one who lost something that day.
Yeah.
I think that's the most they say about that. There's never this final showdown between Sarah and Juno where she's like, I fucked your husband, and they don't go into that. They never do. It just kind of exists under the surface as just this, are we going to come to terms with that somehow? Now, maybe this is my only complaint with this movie, but Juno, and it's not even a complaint as more as maybe it was just the sensibility of the times, but Juno as a character, okay, we immediately don't like her because we understand that she's been cheating with Sarah's husband, but which is one of her best friends. Why the fuck would she do that? That's fucked up to begin with. But then there's the whole cave element of it, Damon, where for some reason Juno didn't want to tell anyone that she wanted to discover a new cave system as a team. I think that'd be nice to just share ahead of time and be like, hey, I think all of us girls coming together, it would be really cool if I have a plan to discover this new cave system. And if we did it as a team, they could name this cave after us. I think it'd be amazing. it wouldn't make a good movie. So I'm forgiving. It's not even really a problem. But like, I guess the only issue is like, yeah, okay, for the times it worked. Now it's the only thing that I look back on and go, okay, that it's paper thin to make Juno that sort of irresponsible. That's probably really it, and that's not a big deal. It doesn't ruin this movie or anything. But I just go, oh, okay, well now we'd have to be smarter about it if we did this movie today.
Yeah, and my only pushback on that, and this is very minor because I agree, it's not a big sticking point, and I agree it is a little thin in that moment. But my only defense for that in terms of the writing, because I think that this is for what is ultimately a pretty simple story. Like when you talk about
Very.
story, this is not overly complicated. We meet Sarah and her friends whitewater rafting. There's that very knowing look. Yeah, because Paul, the husband, helps Juno get her helmet off or something. They kind of look at each other, and you're like, oh yeah, they're doing it on the side. And then they catch that look from the friend Beth, and she's like, yep, she knows. Like they're definitely doing it.
The two of them definitely don't have puckered buttholes when they're in private together. Let's put it
They
that
are
way.
definitely they definitely know what each other look like naked. And then like 10 minutes later they're driving on the road and they the car crash, and I mean this horrific car crash, and both the husband and daughter die. So a year later they get together, and Juno in a weird way is like trying to make it up to Sarah, like because throughout the entire movie her biggest concern is Sarah. She's feeling guilty for what she's done. And
Yeah.
she says it to her at one point. She's like, I'm sorry I left so soon after the funeral. She's telling her friend, I was boning your husband, and I was also sad that he was dead, but I can't tell you that I was boning your husband. So the entire film is Juno like trying to play like mama bear to Sarah because this is her guilt talking, right?
Yeah.
The only reason I don't push back as much about the whole new discovery of the cave, and this again, it's just the way I interpret it.
Yeah. Very minor stuff.
Could be totally wrong. Yeah. The only reason I interpret it that way is because these are thrill seekers, and they are pretty clearly like extreme sport thrill seekers. And my only defense would be like, this sounds like something a thrill seeker would do. Like this sounds
Oh
like,
yeah. No, totally.
and like and again, not telling the friends, like not knowing the danger they were stepping into. This is just like, it is thin. I agree. But like, that's my only defense is like, they're all kind of, they're the kind of people who are like looking at the top of the building and be like, I wonder if I could jump off that. So like, that's just,
Oh sure. Yeah. Yeah.
and like, I think that's probably why. And I think that this was like Juno's sad attempt at keeping the group together after a tragic event basically tore them apart, at least tore one part of them out, which was Sarah. And this a year later is her guilt talking, and it's like her way of trying to, put the group back together again, put the puzzle pieces back together again, and it fails miserably. Long before the preachers show up, but yeah, I agree. It is a little thin, but like I said, that's my only defense. I don't know a lot of extreme sports people. I know a couple people who
I know
are
a few. Yeah.
who are into like rock climbing and skydiving like that. And I'm not that dude. Like I would go skydiving. I have no desire whatsoever to go rock climbing. But I know a couple people are like that, and they are a little like they are a little wacky. Like they are very much like it's like that episode of Seinfeld where Elaine is dating the Mimbo. Remember that? Like the perfect guy. They're in the movie theater and she's talking to him and he's like, hey babe, you know I jumped off that balcony I'd get hurt? Like it's those kind of of people like, hey, you see that wall over there? You think I could climb it and not get hurt? Like
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying is like, I think that whole crew would have been super gung ho to be like, yeah, let's discover a cave together. But it's more important to the plot that like nobody knows where they are is the big thing. But I feel like the timeline, maybe a couple hours, like it doesn't even like it wouldn't have messed up the timeline at all for them to be like, okay, well, someone will be coming for us, and they could just be like, we're 3 hours away from anything. No one's coming for us minimum 3 hours, and that's when they discover we're missing.
yeah.
That so like the clock will always be running. However, to kind of maybe even walk back a little bit of my complaint, it certainly tracks for Juno's poor decision making.
It,
because she's over there fucking her best friend's husband. So yeah, she doesn't make the best choices. So okay, again, the minorest of issues that I've ever had with this movie was that on the rewatch. I was like, oh yeah, on the rewatch, like this, like I wouldn't have made this my final draft. This would have been my first draft, and then it would have been like, okay, I need to fix how Juno gets everybody in there, and that was kind of like the biggest thing that I took from the rewatch.
do you want to know my biggest minor complaint of this movie? And it's a funny one, but it's true. And they do this in a lot of movies, and I get it. I understand why they do it because I know filmmaking. I'm not a film. You're a filmmaker. I'm not, but I understand filmmaking. I've read enough books and behind the scenes. Like, why do they? If everyone always curious, like, why is it when you're watching a movie the roads are always wet? You notice that
Yeah.
the roads are always wet.
Oh yeah.
Why did they do that? Because back in the 70s, I think it was the French Connection, if I remember correctly. They filmed it that way, and it just shows up better on camera. So now every film you ever see, 95% of them, you'll notice the streets are wet. It just looks better on camera.
It looks great.
That's why it's always that way. So you notice, like, every major film you watch, the streets are always, it looks like it just rained everywhere
Yeah.
you watch.
It's called a wet down.
Yeah, that's just a trick of filming. So my biggest complaint, and again, I know why they do it, but it just bugs me, is the weak ass flashlights they have in this movie because they got like the tiniest little spotlight on the wall.
Yeah.
And like I remember when I was that age, that 2005, I used to carry around a Maglite flashlight in my car because I drove a piece of shit car, so I was just waiting for it to break down, like on the side. So I have a Maglite so I could look down the engine and fix whatever was wrong. My Maglite in 2005 would like light up a room. Like it would light up a full room in that. And I understand it's a trick of filming. You can't because it interferes with the actual lighting.
Yeah, it's not gonna look good.
Like, yeah. So I know why they do it, but I'm just like, you're in a cave. Like, can we be a little bit more realistic here that their lights wouldn't look like they were like dim to the point of going out? Because their lamps, their lights in this movie are so incredibly weak.
Yeah, I know. But I you know what? But speaking of lighting, I loved the stylistic lighting in this movie. It was so cool because they would have two different. I mean, they had the weak, weird spotlights, which actually benefit the horror and the dread because you see less. It makes total sense why they're doing that, of course. But then they have the flares. When they need to really light up a cavern, they crack a flare open and they toss it down, and it creates this really great red glow, and it just, the whole thing is just bathed in this blood red. And of course that harkens back to, like, giallo and Italian horror, and it just looks great. It's high contrast. One side's all shadow, one side's all red. It puts so much atmosphere in the movie. I'm actually talking about this with a buddy of mine who's about to make a horror film that I'm helping him produce. We were talking about, like, just even the locations you choose and the lighting you choose can add to the atmosphere of dread when it's kind of lacking. Because there are other cave movies, and they don't feel like horror movies, and they're set in the exact same settings and they do the exact same things. But choosing that lighting, that flare, that blood red flare, creates an extra air of atmosphere. Then they have those little snap green glowing glow sticks. They toss those down. That creates like an alien environment. So all of a sudden now the green signifies, like, oh, now we're with something that we didn't understand before, which is these weird little crawler things. Has there ever been? Yeah, they're called crawlers. That's actually what they are called. I guessed completely off the top of my brain, and I'm looking. They are indeed called crawlers. The green kind of signifies the alienness of the crawlers. So yeah, I mean, Neil Marshall, man, batting 1,000 with Dog Soldiers and Descent right back to back. I mean, those are two very, very, very solid horror movies.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the visuals. You just mentioned it there. I want to give a shout out to Sam McCurdy, who did these. He was a cinematographer, and he's worked with Neil Marshall a lot. He also worked with him on Game of Thrones in a couple episodes. Neil Marshall directed two of the best episodes of Game of Thrones, one of which was the episode where the wildlings attack the wall and they attack the Night's Watch, which is an iconic episode. That's a Neil Marshall episode. unbelievable. And Sam McCurdy also did the cinematography on that. He's done a lot of stuff. He's done, obviously, outside of just working with Neil Marshall. He worked on Peacemaker just recently, the James Gunn series.
Yeah.
He worked on that. Lost in Space, the Netflix series. He worked on Carnival Row, which is a very stylized series as well. He's worked on a lot of stuff, but Sam McCurdy did cinematography. But the visuals in this movie are stunning. You talked about the lighting, the green light with the glow stick and the red light with the flare. Brilliant. I don't know what it is about Neil Marshall as a director, but when you watch that Game of Thrones episode I'm talking about, the Wall episode where the wildlings are attacking the Night's Watch, and for the people who aren't Game of Thrones fans, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get too deep in the woods on that show. It's a battle episode. It's a fight. It's an episode where it's just fighting. That's all on a soundstage. Like, that's not like they built a stage and it looks like an epic war happening, right? This movie is all filmed on a soundstage. When they first came up with the concept, when Neil Marshall first came up with the concept and he got it produced, he's like, I want to shoot it in the cave. And the studio is like, abso-fucking that is impossible. It is just a disaster waiting to happen to actually attempt to shoot this in a real working cave. Not going to happen. So they went to a soundstage in London and they built this. And I watched the behind the scenes of, in particular, that pucker-inducing scene I mentioned earlier when they're crawling through the tiny little hole to get to the other side, and there's the bit of the cave-in when they're rushing Sarah to get out when she gets stuck. I watched them filming this. I watched them from the perspective of the outside looking in. And it looks so utterly generic. Like, it literally looks like somebody put styrofoam, painted it brown, and it's in a box. It's just literally a box built to look like a tunnel. It does not look like anything. To take that and be able to shoot it and then turn it into what we see in the film, to where you have... You know, and I know, Patrick, a lot of times when you watch films, you really do have to suspend disbelief. Like, I know, like, the look of this is a way, like, of course, obviously, we're talking, like, when you go, like, outer space, but I'm talking, like, in general. Like,
yeah.
The look of a scene, you can look at it and say, that doesn't look great, but I can live with it. Like, whatever. Maybe I'm just disillusioned because I think this is such an incredible horror film, Patrick, but this looks like a cave.
Yeah.
There's never a moment where it feels like a set. I would have sworn in 2005 that this was shot in a real cave. And, again, I understand they're not in a cave that's never been explored and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I would have bet $1 million they filmed this in some version of a cave, a very controlled cave. When I was a kid, we went on a field trip to a cave. I've been in caves, like when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I know there are real working caves where it's safe to go. That's how I thought it was real. 100% thought it was real.
Even on this last viewing, even back in whenever this first came out, I definitely wasn't thinking it was a soundstage. But even on this last viewing, I still didn't see it as a set. Even with my filmmaker mind going the whole time, like, I just felt so immersed in a real world. It never really felt fake at all. And a lot of times, you know what the trick is, Damon? Turning some fucking lights off. And that's credit to our cinematographer, because let me tell you, and this is I have one of my best friends in the world, Milan Spasic, who has shot stuff for me, gorgeous cinematography. You know what we argue about all the time? He wants too many lights on. And I go, I need that one turned off. And he goes, it looks nicer if I leave it on. Please turn it off. Just turn it off. I need to see less. Our cinematographer here, what was his name again? Sam McCurdy. Sam McCurdy was a brave cinematographer who was willing to work with less light, to show less. The less you show, the less likely you are to see the seams. The more likely you are to fill in the gaps. McCurdy's a smart enough guy to understand, like, horror is about the unknown. So if I don't quite know what's in that corner, if I don't quite orient myself with this cave, it's scarier. It just is. It just becomes scarier. And as they move along, like the lights don't move with them, and the cave doesn't get brighter and brighter and brighter as they go because they keep dropping flares or they keep dropping. There are points in this movie where there's only a glint of light motivated from some other part of the cave, and it's like it's just rimming the side of their face and silhouetting them just a little bit, just so you could see an outline of them moving. That's like a cinematographer's nightmare typically. But if you're like him and you go, no, it looks scarier if I do that. It just does. It just sells better. And then it sells a set, which when you're on set and all the work lights are up and you're just walking around, you go, how are we ever going to trick anyone into thinking this is a fucking cave? This looks like a bunch of styrofoam with some kid paint on it. And then your production team jumps into action. They put the dirt right where you need it when you need it. They put the light where you need it or turn it off when you need it and all that good stuff. And all of a sudden you're selling it, and they sell it, man. I've never once gone, that's all on a set. It doesn't feel that way at all.
Well, also with the lighting in particular, you mentioned less light is sometimes a good way to cheat, in those moments when you're on the soundstage. I've seen a lot of horror films where the film is dark for that reason. They're trying to keep it a mystery. They're trying to keep it a surprise. And rather than make it a surprise or make it terrifying, what they actually end up with is I can't fucking see anything. Like I'm just seeing nothingness, and you're not getting me because I just can't see what I'm seeing. Like it's just pitch black darkness, and it's just not shot well. The subtlety of what you're doing here with just the hint of a glimmer of a red light, a hint of a glimmer of a green light, the outline and the silhouettes of shadows, the infrared camera that they use at one point during the film, just enough. Because they really say, they tell you at the very beginning, when they go down the cave, Juno tells Holly, who is like the real like go-getter of like, I want to be in this thing, but like she's like the super extreme, I'll just dive head first into the fucking lake and not look where I'm going girl. She tells her, as dark as you think it is when you turn off the lights in a room, it's worse down there. It is pitch black. There is no lighting whatsoever, so you have to be careful around every corner. And when you get down there, it is that pitch black dark in every corner.
Yeah.
But for whatever, just the little things they do, including this, the little bit of cinematography with the shadows, the silhouettes, the glimmer of light, the glow coming from another room sometimes. Like you'll see the green light coming from one room is just the slightest little bit of a shimmer in another room. It works so well. And even though this is an incredibly dark film in terms of like the lighting, it is dark subject matter too, I suppose, but dark in terms of lighting, I never felt lost. I never felt out of place. I never felt like, what is going on here? What am I seeing? I always knew exactly what I was seeing, even when I couldn't see it. When I knew that Sarah fell down into a pit, into a dark pit, and she was in a pool of blood, and you just see her come out and you see the briefest little shimmer of red on her face, I knew exactly what she was going through, and I couldn't see more than just the littlest, tiniest red blotch across her face, but I knew exactly what was happening, and that is all credit to Sam McCurdy and Neil Marshall for the way they shot this movie. It is, again, great looking and visually stunning for a movie that is inostensibly shot in the dark.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic movie shot in the dark. It really is. It's great. The Blood Pit's a great example where it's just like, they could have had an excuse for a light to be a flashlight to have rolled up and is now bouncing off the cave wall so you could see how bloody red that pit is. They don't do that. There's just enough light to show you that there's blood on her face, and you go, "Oh, that's not good." She's literally in a pit of blood. That's not water. That is just a pit of blood.
Can we talk? We're going to get into categories in a little bit, but can we talk real quick about the creatures?
Yes, please.
Earlier, you're right. We haven't done a ton of creature features on this show, but we have done some. We did Pumpkinhead. And can I break the news about our next series we're doing? We do franchises. We did.
I don't know. Should we leave that for the year-end episode?
Oh, okay. I guess we could.
Because truth be told, our our year and our new franchise won't come until January. We don't
That's
want to tease them too far out,
that's true. That's
but
true.
it's coming. We are. I guess we'll tease. I could tease that right now. Our next franchise coverage is coming in January.
Yes, we will have that coming in January. We did Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We did Nightmare on Elm Street. Our next one comes out in January. Um, but we haven't done a ton of creature features. We've done some. As I mentioned, Pumpkinhead, there are a few here and there. But we mentioned earlier, just to again talk about creature feature, Alien, Aliens, the Xenomorph, Predator is another one we could reference. The crawlers in this film, not to steal what you already said, Patrick, very simple. They're humanoid creatures. They are humans that just stopped evolving, except they evolved to survive in this cave. And I watched an interview with Neil Marshall where he talked about this, and he said these are not just they are humans. They are human beings that never evolved, and they only evolved to survive in these caves over thousands of years. Like these are not some alien creature or some kind of animalistic, whatever. It's not like that. This is a human creature that just survived in this cave and adapted to survive in this cave, and this is through thousands of years evolution of what they have become. They're basically more or less naked, cave dwelling things with no vision, sharp teeth, acute hearing, and they have an unbelievable ability to crawl on the walls, crawl on the cave, things like that. Like they're basically like spiders, more or less, like spider people.
Yeah.
But these things, Patrick, these things are so scary looking. There's that great moment early in the film when they're trying to find their way out, and we get that silhouette of the head of the creature, and it goes, you see and you see a little bit of dripping goo coming out of its mouth. And then we don't actually see the creatures again for like another 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
And then obviously when Sarah's looking around the flashlight, she sees one in the wall and then goes back and it's gone. And then obviously like 2 minutes later, mayhem goes fucking crazy. But those creatures, Patrick, those things are terrifying. Those are some scary ass creatures.
It is a fantastic and very thoughtful design because I have a sort of like amateur love for like biology and animal biology, especially. Excuse me. And what I saw was like, oh, they modeled these after like cave newts. When you find like a newt in a cave and they're iridescent, almost pale, almost invisible, or almost clear skinned, but there's like a whitish skin when light hits it. So I could see the design, why they designed their color like that. They're hairless because they've evolved to not need hair. Hair is not an issue where they live. Since they are a mammal, they're the offshoot of the human species. They've now developed bat-like traits because in a cave they need better hearing, so their ears are designed differently. Their eyes cloud over because they simply don't need them. They're completely blind, again, like these cave newts and stuff like that. These blind animals that you find because they have no need for the light. And their echolocation, right? They've circumvented language and they went straight to echolocation because that's all they need to get around out here. That's how they can communicate. So basically, they're like a human bat hybrid. But it's terrifying. It's so well made. I mean, anytime they're in the light, they look great, and you go, shit, like way to like not overdo it. I think I've never seen the sequel. Have you?
No, and we'll talk about that later with one of our categories, of course. There is a sequel to this movie, and I have not seen it. I do know that it involved a lot of the same people, not Neil Marshall. He was a producer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can't give you the reference to that.
Yeah, but like basically my point with that is at least in this movie, they don't overdo it. They don't overshow them. And, think about movies where that was incredibly successful. Alien, Predator, The Descent, you know what I mean? And these are not small potatoes movies. These are some of the best you'll ever see. they don't bash you over the head with these things and show them off for too long, and then all the novelty of them wears off. You get just enough to appreciate, and I do intensely appreciate the design of these creatures. They're some of the best that I've ever seen in horror.
They are, like I said, they are utterly terrifying. Like when you get a look at them, and again, because this also goes back to the lighting thing we were talking about before. Generally, when we see these creatures in this movie, it's through a red glow, a green glow, an infrared camera. Brief moments when we see them next to a light, when when the women realize they can't see them, they can hear them, and so they have like their flashlights on, and so you do get a little bit of a little bit of a better look, especially in that one moment when two of the girls are like hovered in a cave laying down and the creature's like crawling past them, and you see a little bit more up close, and you see the teeth and the eyes, and it's real, but it's everything about these things is scary. Like there is nothing about them that is not utterly scary. And the design just works so well. I mean, it's literally just a hairless, humanoid looking creature with white iridescent skin, as you mentioned, bald with bat-like ears, and a different kind of developed nose, like it looks almost like a Voldemort nose, like from Harry Potter, and then the teeth, which are like the incisor, the sharp teeth, which is what they use to chew and kill their prey. It is, man. As far as creatures go, simple sometimes works better. We talk about that a lot of time in storytelling. Like simple sometimes works better. This is a case where the creatures look better because they're simple. They didn't overdo it. They didn't give them wings and shit. They didn't, they didn't have like spikes coming out of their arms, and they're humanoid. And I liked when I heard that interview with Neil Marshall when he said that. He's like, these are not aliens. These are not like they're humanoid creatures. They just were in this cave and they've never left, and they've just evolved to this to survive. That's what it is. I mean, that's what evolution, you evolved to survive in your surroundings. That's what these things did. They never left this cave, and so their vision's useless. They live in the dark. Why do they need to see anything? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. They've developed themselves. So that's what the creatures look like. Like this is what, as you mentioned, like a cave might. This is what a creature would look like to survive down here.
So cool. Like just so cool.
Let's talk last thing before we get to categories, Patrick. Let's talk about the ending and the alternate ending.
Yes, and I did watch the alternate.
A lot of people don't know this, and I watched the behind the scenes with Neil Marshall, and let me explain this before we discuss it. So when Neil Marshall wrote this movie, originally he called it, as I mentioned in the intro, The Dark. And his idea was basically Sarah's journey into the dark, because his real focus was on her and her descent into madness, because as she gets deeper and deeper into this cave, she's forced to do things that are far outside of her character. She has to kill things. She has to save her friends, and then at some point she realizes that Juno has, left one of their friends for dead, and she starts to realize what kind of person Juno actually is. And so and throughout the entire movie, there's these little flashes where she keeps seeing her daughter with a birthday cake. And the whole idea that Neil Marshall explained is that she's losing her mind. Like as she goes deeper and deeper into these caves, like her mind is slipping. And so that was the entire point of his script, was this woman descending into madness. And that's why they eventually just titled the film The Descent. It was originally called The Dark. And so the original ending is Sarah turns on Juno. She stabs her with a climbing tool, leaves her for dead. She climbs out. She finds the escape route where the creatures have gone out to gather food. She gets out. She jumps in the car. She drives away. She gets down the road, she screams in bloody murder that she gets away, and then she turns and sees Juno in the car, which is the ending we all know. She gets scared and she turns, and that's just the end. And that's the end we all know. Sarah escaped. She made it out alive. She's now haunted by the fact that she left Juno for dead. The original ending that Neil Marshall intended was all that happens, but then after she sees Juno in the car, she screams and wakes up, and she's still in the cave. She never gets out of the cave, and she basically dies. She basically stays there. She never escapes. She just descends into madness while basically like what we see of these creatures, they're going to get her, they're going to kill her. She's never getting out. And she's at peace with that because she sees her daughter with that birthday cake, and it's like, I'm going to be reunited with my family in the afterlife, so I don't care anymore. And so she dies. So it's a very dour, very downtrodden ending.
That
And
kind of ending.
it's just a very bleak ending. And he said that when they did test screenings in the UK, which is where this originally came out, where it did great. In the UK, they call it the UK ending now. It's great. Everyone liked it. When they did test screenings in the US, which you and I both know, if you want a successful film, a really successful financial film, it has to do it in the US. Like it or not being egotistical for our international fans, just the reality of it. They showed it over here, and the original ending, he said, scored in like the 70s. People liked it. It was like, they got it, they understood it. But then when they did the cut, when the studio's like, let's try it with just, you cut it when she sees Juno in the car. We know she survives, but, she's obviously still being dramatically affected by the incident that happened in the cave. When they cut it off, and that was the ending, a little bit of hopefulness that Sarah survives, the scores jumped up in the 80s. So it wasn't a huge difference, but it was enough where the studio was like, let's do this. And Neil Marshall was like, I'm okay with it. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
He actually said, I like the original ending better. That's the way I intended it. That's the way I wrote it. But I don't have a problem if that's the way they did it. And so that's why it's the ending here in the US. The UK ending is the bleak ending of Sarah never making it out alive. So, Patrick, you've seen both now.
Yes, I do prefer the original ending. And I think, and for one weird reason that probably bugged Neil then, was it wraps up the motif of her seeing the daughter with the birthday cake, because it happens twice in the movie. First time it happens is in the car accident, right as the car accident is happening. She's in the dark all of a sudden, and the only light she sees is the light of her daughter's birthday cake. And then she wakes up. Well, she gets that vision right near death. Second time, she's trapped in the cave. I think she gets knocked unconscious or something. And she sees the birthday cake again. She sees her daughter, but this time the descent monster's there and it's a surprise, and wakes up again. She was moments from death. That's when she saw it. So the third motif of her believing she's escaped, almost getting like run over by a semi truck on the side of the road. Another great scare. And then seeing Juno and that freaking her out, and then going back to the final motif of seeing the birthday cake again, and then waking up and realizing not only is she near death, she is near death, and is this truly the end? Because I think the final shot is like a wide shot of the cave as the creatures are descending on her.
Yeah.
So to me, that's completism. To me, that's, oh, wow, okay, that motif of seeing the birthday cake every time she got nearer and nearer to death would have been complete. It would have been cyclical. And they chose the other, it doesn't ruin the movie either way, but they chose the other route because it scored a little higher. And by the way, this is a financially bonkers good movie. It made just multiple times over, it made its money back. So they certainly chose a good ending for America, at least. And their ending opens up a sequel, which they ended up making. So the studios love that shit. So it's all good for them. But I do prefer the other one because it truly keeps that motif going.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't seen the sequel, but I know the premise of the sequel, and the premise of the sequel is that Sarah survives and she meets a group of people who want to go back into the cave to find these creatures, more or less. I know that's the premise. So Sarah gets drawn back in to go back into the cave.
Why Sarah would go into that cave is ridiculous.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen if she doesn't actually survive. Right. I prefer the original ending that Neil Marshall intended, not only because, again, I want to, I appreciate artistic vision for a film, but also because maybe I'm a weirdo, maybe I'm just like twisted or whatever, but, I'm certainly not opposed to happy endings, and there are absolute movies where a happier ending makes more sense. Like it does. Like, like Scream would not be Scream if Sidney Prescott doesn't kill Billy Loomis and survive. She's not the final girl. You have to have her. It would not be the same movie without that. But this movie, it feels, as you said, more complete and more on brand with who we have learned Sarah to be and who she has to become in this movie. Her surviving, while I understand the inclination to go that route, her basically saying, I'm done. I've gotten revenge on the woman who wronged me in life, and now I'm just going to be reunited with my daughter. I'm out.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. That is poetic in a way. And also it's poetic in a way that they're in a cave that had never been discovered, that had never been explored, with cave creatures. You're not getting out alive. Like, you're not. Like, there's chances are you're not going to find that little pinprick of light that you can climb up through a hillside of bones to get out and make it.
Great shot, by the way.
It is a great shot. Chances are, though, you're going to die down here.
Yeah.
And her death in that moment in the alternate ending, the UK ending, is more satisfying because she doesn't want to live anymore. She's avenged her life by getting back at Juno, and now she's avenging her death, and because she's going to be with her daughter, which is what she ultimately wants to be. That's all she's ever wanted since a year ago. The moment her husband and daughter died, she's wanted to be reunited with her daughter. And that's her just letting go and her saying, I'm out. I'm done.
Yeah.
Come get me. And there's something very poetic about that. There's also, as he mentioned, the entire premise of the movie, this woman's descent into madness. That encapsulates that perfectly, because just saying, I'm done, take me, that's really what she's doing. And that is a very poetic ending for what this film was. Now, again, to be fair, I don't hate the ending. I don't hate the alternate. I don't hate that she survives. I get it. Like, I understand why it scored higher. That little blip of hope does make a difference for a woman who has lost everything. Like, that is a woman you do root for to survive, right? Like, that is a woman you want to see make it out of that cave. But me personally, I prefer the under ending. But again, I get it. I understand why people liked it.
Yeah, I get it. People want happy endings. I love a fucking bleak ending, Damon. I mean, that's just how I want it to go. It was an ending made for my sensibilities, and my sensibilities do not track with general audiences.
Well, and to be fair, Neil Marshall, he talked about his big influences for this film, and he mentioned The Thing, and he mentioned that specifically. When we reviewed The Thing on this show, which is one of our shared favorite horror films ever.
Yeah.
It's a hopeful yet bleak ending. It's that way, like, when it ends, Kurt Russell and Keith David sort of make it. Like, they're alive, but not for long, and they're not going to make it. Like, we know they're destined to die. They may have stopped the alien from escaping and, getting out into the world, but they're not going to make it. Like, they're dead. Like, they're going to die. It's just time. It's not like when. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
That's the same thing here. Like, Sarah got what she wanted. She got revenge on Juno, and she sees her daughter that she's going to be reunited with. That's all she wants. She doesn't care about surviving at that point. That is survival to her.
Yeah. No, poetically, it works way better for me. But Damon, I'm the kind of guy who puts on the road for a good bundle up Thanksgiving viewing. That's the kind of guy I am.
Yeah, I don't mind the bleak ending. I really don't. I don't mind the happy ending when it makes sense, but I am a big fan of the bleak ending. I will be honest about that. That's another of our shared favorite movies, which may have the most bleak ending in film history, is The Mist. And there might be an alternate version where that doesn't happen in that movie, and it wouldn't be the same movie. That is the bleakest ending of a movie ever, I would say. And it's awesome.
Oh my God. I think it just shared, the Mist just had an anniversary around the time of this recording. And I remember reading that, and it's just a smile crept over my face because I go, "What? That's one of the best movies ever, dude. It's so fucking bleak. I love that."
It is. It's amazing. All right, let's get into categories. We got a lot to get to with this movie, The Descent. As you can clearly tell to this point in the podcast, it's a film both Patrick and I absolutely adore. So let's get into best performance in this movie and kick things off there. And again, I do want to give credit where credit's due to Neil Marshall because again, when they were originally putting this film together, it wasn't necessarily being made as an all-female cast. His focus was on Sarah. She was the main character, and then he kind of spiraled out from there. But at some point during the writing process and during the early production process, he's like, why don't we make this an all-female cast? It's something you don't generally see in horror. I adore that. I absolutely adore that this is an all-women's cast. Absolutely, and they all absolutely kill it. So to be clear, we're going to pick out our favorite. Everybody in this movie is good.
Yeah, everybody in this movie is good. I did get disoriented at one point, and I couldn't tell who was who. The only ones I definitely always recognized were Sarah and Juno. But everybody else, I was like, "Who's that? Who is that?" Like, it's part of the disorientation of the whole process. But I ended up picking for my best performance our lead, Shauna McDonald as Sarah. She does carry the movie. She does carry the all the motivation, all of that good stuff comes from Shauna McDonald and her performance. And I felt for her. I felt for her as a victim of circumstance, and as a victim of a shitty friendship, and as a victim of kind of stupid being the smart one in a stupid group, or maybe she's kind of stupid because she doesn't know that her friend's cheating on her on her husband. But I just appreciated her performance. I thought she was a very solid lead for a movie that doesn't necessarily need a lead, if that makes sense. It needed her arc to complete, and I liked it. And I liked where it went.
What I like about her performance in particular is because a lot of times in these movies, you get in these kind of movies where it's like a survival kind of story like this, is you get the one character who is constantly strong. You know, the leader, the harrowing leader who just stares death in the face and says, "Come at me."
Right.
What I love about her performance as Sarah is that she's vulnerable. When she gets stuck in that tunnel early in the movie, which I keep talking about because it's just terrifying, she's vulnerable. She's scared for her life in that moment. She's absolutely scared, and she's like panicking. And she's like, "I can't get out. I'm stuck. I can't get out." And then when her friend Beth comes back to get her, she's like trying to calm her down, trying to like, you got to slow down, breathe. And then when the cave-in starts happening, she's like, "All right, fuck this. You got to move." And like you see the genuine terror on Sarah at that moment, like what's happening to her. By the end of the movie, she's earned and gained her bravery. Like she's gained that, like again, she may have lost her mind, but she's just like in the mode of like, screw these creatures. I'm going to kill as many as I humanly can. And at one point she literally jams her thumbs into whatever the eye sockets are, one of the creatures, to kill it. Because at that point she's just gone. And I love that evolution we see in this character in what is ultimately a 2-hour journey, for her, I'm saying like in the movie, timeline's 2 hours? Like we see her scared and vulnerable in that cave. And then by the end, when she's facing off with these creatures, she's gained her strength and she's probably lost her mind, but she is facing down everything with a reckless amount of fearlessness.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there is so much to that. You're right about the vulnerability of the character and all that stuff. It's great. It's a well-drawn character. They all kind of are.
They are really good. So for my best performance, I'll admit I was a little bit like you where I kind of lost track of people a little bit. Like I would add Holly because I did recognize Holly more because, the hair, and she was kind of like the younger.
Yeah, she stood out a little bit, but she dies early.
She did. And I really did like Alex Reed as Beth. She's the one who gets stabbed in the neck. I liked her performance as well. But, if I'm not going to go with Shauna McDonald, I'm going to go the other route, and that's Natalie Mendoza as Juno. What is so good about her performance, in my opinion, Patrick, is that she's very reckless in her choices, which we talked about earlier. She's taking them into a cave that has never actually been explored. And she sees this as like a thrilling expedition for them because this is what they do. They're thrill seekers. So there's a recklessness to her in that regard. Even though we know she's a total shitheel because she was boning her best friend's husband before they died, she does have heroic moments. Like, she legitimately has heroic moments. Now, she does some really screwed up things, like when she swings the axe around and stabs Beth in the neck and then just leaves her for dead. Yes, that's incredibly fucked up. But she also is the one who first kills a creature and stops another creature and saves, like, she saves her friends in other parts. She's not a one-dimensional character that's just a bad guy or a bad girl in this case. Like, she's just not a villain. There are layers to Juno. Like, Juno is Juno a coward at certain moments? Yes. Is Juno a horrible person for sleeping with her best friend's husband? Absolutely. Is Juno terrible for leaving someone for all these? Yes, those are all things. But she also has bravery. She also shows heroic moments. She also does save her friends. It's a really complicated character because while she is ultimately, in a way, the villain, the crawlers are the creatures, but she's the villain of this story. But Natalie Mendoza plays her in such a way that there are moments when you do like her, when you do appreciate that she's there. You know, they wouldn't have made it through some of these situations without Juno. So it's a little bit more complicated than just to say she's the bad guy, she's the villain. She is, but they made her a little bit more complicated than that. And I think a big part of the way that comes through on screen is because of Natalie Mendoza.
You're right. There's not much to add in that respect. She's a very layered character. She doesn't really have villainy. What she has, and you mentioned it, what's really important is that she's cowardly. Not cowardly in the outward sense, because she's actually got a lot of fight in her. She's cowardly about her emotional mistakes. The killing Beth was an accident. It was a complete accident. And she just said, "Oh my God, like I'm mortified because I was fighting off one of those things and I thought another one was attacking me and I accidentally killed Beth. Like I'm fucking freaking out here." She can't cop to that. She can't cop to the things that she does wrong. Even the idea of the cave, you know, like, oh, I wanted to do it without telling you guys, you know, like she makes bad choices. And so that comes across, but she doesn't feel like a doofus. She doesn't feel horribly painted. You know what she kind of reminds me of? We just reviewed this. She kind of reminds me of Christian from Midsommar. Like, it's just like, dude, why can't you just be a person? In the respect of, like, just being honest with people. That's her biggest fault. That's her biggest problem in this movie. If she would just be honest, she'd probably, like, 9 of her 10 problems would be gone.
That's her cowardice, is her inability to face her actions.
Yeah.
When she's in motion and she's out there doing her thing, she is heroic. She is a badass. In a lot of ways, she is the badass.
Yeah.
Then when she sleeps with her best friend's husband, she can't face up to that. Rather than face up to that and admit what she's done, she goes to the funeral and then just abandons her friend for the next year because she can't face what she's done. When they get down, that's why I said it almost tracks with the character that she wouldn't tell her friend that they were going down in this unexplored cave together because she's too much of a coward. She just did it and not thinking of the repercussions. Same thing with Beth. You mentioned it. She stabs her in the neck and she dies. She leaves her there for dead because she's thinking, well, she's dead anyways, and I can't face the repercussions of my actions if people know what I did here, that I accidentally killed one of our friends. Well, these creatures are going to tear her apart and eat her anyways. I'm just going to leave her here and go off onto my own because she can't face the repercussions of her actions. So she's not a coward in terms of her physicality, in terms of the things she's willing to tackle as a extreme, you know, sports person, whatever you want to call her, a thrill seeker, but she can't face her actions for what she's actually done in her life, from cheating with her best friend's husband and all these things.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, let's talk. This is an interesting one. We usually do favorite character here. I like this next category, which was a pick from Patrick, which is worst cave buddy. There are a couple ones in this film where you're kind of like, yeah, I'd really not rather be down here with this one. Who is your worst cave buddy, Patrick? Who are you not spelunking with in this crew?
I sure as shit ain't spelunking with Holly. She was too impulsive. And I think in these high risk situations, you need somebody who thinks before they act, not Holly style. Not Holly style at all. She thought just for a second she might have seen some light. She goes sprinting in a dark cave. Who the fuck does that? And that was really the catalyst for all their trouble, is when she fell and broke her leg. If she hadn't done that, they might have found their way out of there. They might have been a little bit, but they had to act on a new emergency, and it created a whole new bucket of problems. But just anyone whose instinct is, I'm going to start running in a dark cave, I don't ever invite me to anything ever.
She does that a couple times when they find the one tunnel. She's like, I'll go, and they're like, slow down.
Yeah, it's like, just stop. Fuck. Don't make my life harder. Your enthusiasm should not make my life harder.
Yeah, she is. She's the one. Like, she's the friend you got to keep on a leash. Like, you got to like one of those. Like, you got to put like an attachment on her, make sure she doesn't get too far. Like, she's that friend. You can't let her go too far. Like, hold on now, slow down.
Yeah, put a flashing beacon on her head and just.
Yeah, she is definitely that. The other obvious choice, which is my pick for worst cave buddy, has to be Juno.
Yeah.
Juno is legitimately the badass. Like, they would not have gotten as far as they did. Now, again, they wouldn't have been there in the first place if it wasn't for Juno, but let's take that out of the equation. Once they're there, they have to figure it out. Like, they have to get through this. And they wouldn't have made it as far as they got without Juno. Like, Juno really is the badass. Like, she is totally the badass of the group. That being said, leading them into the cave when she doesn't know where she's going, and it's an expedition into an unknown series of caverns, is terrifying enough. And then when you stab your friend in the neck with a frickin' axe and you just leave her for dead because you think she's dead, when in reality we find out she's not, and you're just like, oh shit, I'm out of here. That's a bad cave buddy. Like, I get it. You didn't mean to stab me in the neck, but you still left me for dead. Like, I wasn't actually dead. You could have tried to call for help or do something, but no, you're just like, oh, fuck it. Too late. She's gone.
Also, don't bring your husband spelunking around Juno. She'll probably fuck him. You know, like, not the best cave buddy, Juno. Sorry.
Yeah, Juno's not the best friend in general, much less cave buddy. Like, she might not be the friend you want around, period.
Yeah, no shit.
Let's talk about best scare. And boy, I tell you what, we could rank these if we really wanted to. Like,
yeah, we could.
This one, but let's talk about best scare, because there's a lot in this movie. So whittling it down to one, Patrick, I'll be honest, going through my list, I had like 4. I was like, well, is it this one or is it this one?
Yeah.
This one? And I'll tell you ahead of time, the one that actually gives me the most anxiety is that tunnel scene when they're stuck in the little tiny.
Yeah.
That's the most anxiety-inducing scene. But I didn't pick that for best scare. So, Patrick, what was your best scare?
My best scare actually doesn't even happen in the cave. Sarah is still obviously reeling from the tragedy that happened to her a year ago. And when they're in the cabin the night before, kind of getting ready for the next big day to go to the cave, she looks out the window and she's just kind of standing out the window. And you kind of know, you're like, this is she's standing at this window too long. Out of nowhere, from the accident, just like in the accident, a pole comes through the window and stabs her in the head. I chose that one because that's the one that truly got me. Like, while I was watching the movie, it just made me jump. So I was like, there's a lot of scares here, but that one got me.
Yeah, the even the car accident in the beginning's a good one. Like, when the husband and the daughter get killed, it's very jarring. It just happens the way it happens. It's very surprising. So mine, again, most anxiety inducing is them crawling through that little tiny tub. That's because that's like a 3-minute scene, and I'm puckered from start to finish on that one. But it's a different kind of scare. That's anxiety. That's different than being scared. I always say it. Sometimes, Patrick, it's the scares you can see coming that scare you the most. Sometimes. Much like it was in Hell House LLC when I talked about the clown scene that got me in that movie, that still, every time I see it, just, it gets me a little bit. This one is when Sarah grabs Holly's camera and says, turn on the infrared, and she's scanning around, and she pans over to one of the friends, and the creature standing right behind her with its gruesome looking face, like staring at them. That fucking freaks me out every single time I see this movie, and I know it's coming. And when you're using an infrared camera, just like in Silence of the Lambs, when Buffalo Bill is using the night vision camera, you know that night vision camera is going to come into play, and you know it's somehow going to play a part in the big finale. When you have an infrared camera and you're scanning around the cave, you know something's gonna jump out at you. You know something's gonna happen. But that one to me was so subtle and so scary when she just pans around and it's right fucking there. I mean, it's right next to her. Man, it jumps me back and I've seen this movie a dozen times. Jumps me.
Oh, you there? I lost you.
Yeah, you froze for a second.
Yeah, you froze for a second too. Technical difficulties, folks. But no, you're right about the infrared camera thing. Definitely, it's weird. It's like the most realistic moment in the movie. Like it feels like I'm really watching somebody's tape, and so I think that's why I think that one sells really, really well, because it feels so intensely grounded in something that is maybe a little more of a heightened sense of reality. Like that's a great one.
I also like the fact that the infrared camera plays a part realistically, because when you're doing these kind of extreme sports, you are like, this was back when they had, camcorders, but like today it'd be a GoPro. You'd be doing the same thing. Like extreme sports people, when they're skydiving, they're rock climbing, they're filming everything. So like this is realistic.
Yeah.
But one of them would have a camera filming all this. So it doesn't feel inauthentic that, oh, they just happen to have a camera and they see the thing. No, that's what you would do. You would absolutely film this if you were doing. That's what extreme sports people do. That's how GoPro makes a living. Like that's what they do.
Absolutely. It's yeah. Yes, it makes sense.
Let's talk about best gore, and I'm going to go first on this one, Patrick, because there's a lot of gore in this movie. There's a lot of blood.
Very gory movie.
Holly getting ripped apart is pretty gory. Another one, I think it's Beth, when Beth finally dies, like she gets ripped apart pretty. There's a lot of gore, especially there's a blood. I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One that gets me, man, and this is kind of going back to the cave thing where it's like the most anxiety-inducing scene has nothing to do with the creatures. The best gore in this movie, the one that gets me every single time, is Holly's compound fracture in that leg.
Yes.
When she falls down that cavern and breaks her leg, and then they're trying to put her back together, and you see her leg snapped out of the skin, through the bones, out of the skin, a compound fracture. It is so gruesome. And it's made even worse because they have to linger on it for so long as they're literally trying to push the bone back into the leg to give her a splint so she can get out of there. Whew, boy, man, that's another one where it's just like the cave scene where they're crawling to that little tiny cavern, that little tiny tunnel. You have to hang around this bone sticking through this chick's leg for a really long time, and it's really uncomfortable.
There's something about leg breaks that must be in our primal DNA, like our cave dwelling ancestors. Like when somebody broke a leg, they were like, they're fucked. Like because every time, like arm breaks don't do that for me. It's the same principle. A limb gets snapped in half. Oh, that sucks. A leg break gets me every time where I'm just like, oh fuck, that's not good. That is not good. And it's gruesome. It has that the gore on that's really good.
It's just, I think that's what makes it my favorite gore, is that they linger on it for so long. Like when they're literally shoving her bone back into her leg and you can hear the crunching and you're screaming. Oh, it's just unbelievable.
You don't want to be Holly then.
Yeah, you do not want to be Holly.
And so my pick for best gore actually is maybe one of the more famous parts of the whole movie, and it was big in the trailer, was when Sarah falls into the blood pit. Quite literally, Damon, a pit of gore. I mean, that's just what it is. And near the final moments of the film, she's running away from an attack. She slips down this one area and she just spills into what you think is a puddle of some sort. Oh, a collection of water. And then you see as she's rising up out of it that is very viscous, is very thick. The whole top layer of it is kind of foamy and gory, and you're just, and it's in the trailer, and it's there's no less effect when you see it in the movie. You're just like, that is literally a 4.5 foot deep puddle of blood and guts. And how do you not enjoy that as some of the best gore in this entire movie?
And it's so disgusting too, because like
Yeah.
blood in general is kind of gross. Imagine being in a pool of random blood,
Rancid,
people,
rotting, nasty blood and gore.
and then she pulls and she peeks out and her eyes are up and she's like breathing. Oh, it's so gross. It's so disgusting. And yeah, she's covered in blood in that moment. It's pretty disgusting. And because like again, this goes back to the lighting. Keep repeating that. The lighting just enough to where you see the red shimmering off her face. And when she comes up, and she has, Sarah has blondish hair, like kind of dirty blonde hair. So it just sticks in her hair, and it's just, oh, it's so disgusting and very, very gory and very, very gross. I would agree that is a very, very good one.
And I want to give a shout out too to another moment, which is kind of the final showdown between it's Juno, Sarah, and some of these crawlers. And I called it the Appalachia Mole Man Massacre.
Yeah.
Where they just kill as many as they can possibly kill so they can get their way out of there. Tons of great gore there too. It's like they're splitting heads. That's where you mentioned the thumb in the eyes earlier in where the eye cavities would be. It's just a gory fucking mess. Like, this movie got all the gore you need.
Oh, I mean, like I said, the eye one was almost my pick because that is very visceral when she's literally jamming her thumbs into this thing's eye. Juno stabbing Beth in the neck is pretty crazy when she gets that axe to her and you see her gurgling with the blood kind of spurting out of her mouth and coming from her neck. That's pretty disgusting. There's so much good gore. Like I said, Holly getting ripped apart when they just dive on her and just start eating her and you see blood and guts just goes flying. There's a lot of gore in this movie.
Yeah, man, that's a gore-tastic movie. Gores, scares. What else do you need? We got that.
It's perfect, Patrick. It's perfect.
Yeah, there's very little I can change here.
Yeah. Let's start. This is a fun one. So, spelunking is one level of an extreme sport. There are a lot of extreme sports out there. So, this is a category you came up with, Patrick, which is the next great extreme sports horror, which is great because there are so many. Here's what's interesting. So in my head, when I saw this category, I was like, I know extreme sports. Like, I don't do them, but I know them.
Me too.
But I want to do a little research. So I just did a Google. Extreme sports. Do you know how many whacked out, fucked up extreme sports there are out there that I had never heard of before about 4 hours ago?
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's a lot of them. There's an intense amount of extreme sports. So really, the extreme sports horror genre is untapped. So I said, let's give ourselves some fodder for some scripts down the line.
So what is the extreme sport that you would like to see in a horror movie?
Now, we kind of got a movie sort of like this already, and it's a movie called Fall, which we did not review on the podcast, but I did eventually end up seeing. Did you end up seeing Fall?
I have seen Fall, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good. It's pretty good. And it's about these women who are extreme climbers. They like to climb extremely high things. And so I was like, we kind of got this one already, but really, Damon, I chose rock climbing. A, I've done a little bit myself, not a lot, just a little bit. But B, I have friends who do it. And then, not on top of all that, Damon, I've seen that movie. Oh, I can't think of it now, but it won an Oscar. It was about the guy who, I think it's called Free Solo. That's the name of the movie. About the guy.
The real story or the movie?
The real documentary, Free Solo.
Yeah.
Pucker factor of 15, Damon. I mean, and the camera work is tremendous, and you see just how treacherous it is to climb something like El Capitan, which is an extreme sheer-faced cliff. Well, what if climbers are up there? And by the way, most climbers, not the hardcore guys that can climb it in a couple of hours, most climbers, they take like a couple of days. They climb up and they actually camp hanging on the side of the cliff. It's extremely extreme sport. And I was like, what if you're halfway up a 2,500 foot face and you realize you're on a cliff with a killer, you're on a cliff with like some fucking crazy weird bat things that have been released from some dank fucking cave, unseen cave system or something. Like there's there's two levels of horror there: the extreme height, and the fact that you can't escape, and then whatever it is, whatever terrifying thing that can have you caught up in that terrible extreme environment.
And you're trapped. That's also what makes it, much like the cave here, makes it so scary, is because when you're rock climbing, and I'm talking like serious rock climbing, like mountain climbing, you're trapped. Like you're not getting down. Like if you're climbing up, you're climbing up a big mountain, you're not just going to get down from the mountain. Like it takes days to get up or down a mountain. So yeah. That's terrifying because you're stuck there. So mine, I knew this was a thing, and I'll explain it in a second. I knew mine was a thing, and people are going to say, dude, you're remaking The Descent. But I'm not. Here's the thing. I have begun developing, and you're a little familiar with this story, Patrick, because we did a short story script a couple years ago that we were working on, and one of the premises I was working on was based around this. So you kind of remember this. But I've developed a little bit of a screenplay I'm working on that has to do with, not the entire film doesn't take place there, but has to do with something called freshwater cave diving. And this is where people go into caves where they have giant reservoirs of water. So it's like an underwater, in a cave under ocean almost, like an underwater, under cave sea. So these are big bodies of water that exist inside of a cave. So yes, I am cheating a little bit because yes, it's still a cave. But there are people who go, people who go scuba diving. There are people who go deep inside spelunking a cave, and then they take the next level down where they're like, we're going to dive into this unknown body where there is zero light, creatures that have not been seen for potentially hundreds of years, if ever. And they go exploring in these underwater caves. And that is a premise that I've worked on with a screenplay I'm working on, which when I originally had the idea, I was doing it out in the ocean. I was like, I wonder, is this a thing? Sure enough, it is a thing. It is a real thing. It is absolutely an extreme sport where people will go into caves and then dive into the reservoir of water that are huge. I mean, some caves have bodies of water that are lake size,
oh yeah,
the Great Lake size, huge, massive bodies of water underground.
Yes. Yeah, miles and miles of systems.
Yeah, miles and miles of water underground. That to me is utterly terrifying. And again, I know I'm playing on a similar premise to The Descent, but you're taking it to that next level. It's one thing, you're already in the dark spelunking underground. Oh yeah, let me just throw on a scuba suit and dive into fucking water and do it too.
I've seen the guys who they take their tank off because they get to a point that's so flat that they can't, with their tank on their back, they have to take the tank off and push it in front of them so they can be flatter. And you're just literally I've been to the Chu Chi tunnels in Vietnam, and I'm not a big guy, Damon, you know me. and I would crawl through a cave where my shoulders were being pinched by the sides of the walls. If you can imagine a cave that tight. Now add all water and the potential of getting completely stuck in water. And you're just like, oh, cool. I'm pinned here and I'm going to drown. It's just double the suck.
Yeah, that's why I said the screenplay I've worked on involves the freshwater. It's actually called freshwater cave diving is what they call it, because it's, it's not salt water, it's probably freshwater, but it's underground cave diving, literally cave diving into water and bodies of water in these caves. So it is a cheating a little bit because it's kind of what The Descent is, but not, because they're just going spelunking. This is that idea of going underwater, and when you go into an ocean, when you go deep enough down the ocean, it's pitch black dark anyways, because the sun can only permeate so far down into the water anyhow. But obviously, human beings are not meant to go that low. The pressure will kill you. You can't go that low, obviously, you know what I mean? But caves are inherently dark anyhow. And you're just voluntarily diving into a pit black pool of water with unknown things around you, unknown crevices. And as you said, you're also in a cave. So as you mentioned, you're going into these little nooks and crannies. So imagine you're in that tunnel scene at the beginning of the descent that I talk about that has a pucker factor for me. Now just put that in a fucking body of water and imagine your terror of being stuck in that then. Dude.
It's all this shit fucking makes me super nervous.
Just talking about it is making me nervous right now. I'm starting to sweat. I'm like, oh my God, like this is awful. Yeah, it's a real thing. I did research for the screenplay I'm working on. I did research and read stories about it, and it's like a real thing. Like people are way into this.
Oh yeah.
Humans are fucked up, Patrick. We do some crazy shit.
You don't need to be in that cave. Get the hell out of there. You have no reason to be in there.
Yeah, we got out of the caves many, many, many millions of years ago. We don't need to go back. That's just, that when I saw that was a real thing, I was like, nope. I mean, you're not going to get me on the side of a mountain either, but you're definitely not getting me in an underwater cave and being like, oh, let's go diving here.
Yeah, so, no, not a chance.
So our next category is remake, sequel, or leave it alone. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is where we take the film that we're reviewing and we basically give the premise, would you remake it? Would you sequelize it, or would you leave it alone? Now, to be fair, as we mentioned earlier in the show, there actually is a sequel to The Descent, and a lot of the stars come back. You know, Sarah, Juno, all the people come back. I know that. I've not seen it. I'm not sitting here saying I have, but I've read it. I've read the premise. So I know a lot of the actors come back for the second film, and it does take place in the same cave system. So there is a sequel. So we're kind of cheating here a little bit by having that as an option because there is a sequel. But the reality is you and I haven't seen it, so we can't really base anything.
I think I've seen pieces of it, and I want to say Juno is like a ghost that is haunting her in the movie.
I can't remember. Yeah, I have no idea. I think I have seen like a minute of it.
Yeah, I've seen like little bits of it.
I think I turned it on and thought I was watching The Descent, and then I realized, like, hold on, this isn't The Descent. It's The Descent too. So we're gonna almost pretend that doesn't exist. Not that either one of us are picking sequel, but just kind of pretending that's not out there. So Patrick, remake, sequel, leave it alone. What's your choice?
This is a very easy, like, leave it alone, because, like, as we're talking about, like, the idea that just this movie is near perfect, like, why sequelize it? Because you're not going to catch what you caught before, unless you can pull off an Aliens, which, if Neil Marshall had been involved, I probably would have jumped right on it and seen what that was all about. So I would say sequel's out for me. Leave it alone's pretty obvious, but you got me thinking, Damien, and this is going to shock you. What about a found footage remake of The Descent? Now, you know I don't love found footage.
I was going to say, that's what I wouldn't expect from you.
You know I don't love found footage, but you got all the reason in the world to have a camera keep rolling. You have all the reason in the world to find this footage, to discover the footage, and have somebody assemble it off camera and show you what was left of it. I think it'd make a pretty compelling movie. And boy, like, you could really get in on some of them tight angles where you're trying to squeeze through a slot inside of a cave. You might have a good found footage movie on your hands.
You know, it's funny. There are a lot of moments in this film when we talk about the way that it's shot, like that little corridor shot, or the scenes when they're in these really tight spaces or in the darkness. And we talk about the silhouettes and the lighting and how they shot it. There's a lot of moments in there where I'm thinking, I actually thought to myself, this could have been a found footage movie. I'm glad it's not.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't get the shots you got, and you wouldn't get the lighting and the production that we got, the visuals that we got, without it being just a regular movie.
It needs a subjective camera.
Yeah, but there were moments where I was like, you could do this. I actually thought that to myself. I was like, you could actually do this as found footage. I could see that. So your premise, while it is a little shocking in terms of remake, is actually an idea I kind of had watching it, thinking they could do this. So yeah, that's not bad. I'm going to go in another route, and I am going to go sequel. But I'm doing my own version of a sequel in this way. You and I both agreed we liked the original ending, where Sarah just doesn't make it out. She dies. Like, she's gone. She's going to be reunited with her daughter, and that's it for her. Part of what is so terrifying about The Descent is when they start going in here and it's an unexplored cave, is they realize it's not unexplored. There have been people here before. They find a cave helmet. They find a hook drilled into one of the cave in that cavern they have to climb over. And at one point, Juno actually says, like, this is 100 years old. Like, people haven't used this kind of equipment in caving and spelunking in 100 years. So somebody was down there. Clearly, they didn't make it out because the creatures swarmed them and swallowed them up. I'm not saying it's a great idea, but you could, in 2023, if you do it the right way, and Neil Marshall, if he has an idea for this, same concept. People going in, and this time, like, maybe it has been explored, but they didn't find the creatures. Like, there's something's going on. Like, now people have actually been down in there, and it's almost like they've gone quiet. And so there's a new group going down into these caves. And I don't need it to be like it's Sarah's cousin.
No.
For her. Just a new group of people dumb enough to go down there. And, again, I'm not saying you're reinventing the wheel. I'm certainly not saying it's going to be as good as the original. But in 2023, maybe like a modern, updated version of this where it's a similar premise and it's just more people trying to duplicate what Sarah and Juno and them did, which are going out in this cave, extreme sports. And maybe they're maybe they're doing the freshwater cave diving and they end up in this horrific situation with these cave crawlers. That's my version of a sequel. It doesn't need to be connected. The only connection you need is maybe they find, the remnants. They find the skeleton of Beth, or they find the big clue that Juno killed Beth was when she ripped her necklace off, and then Sarah found the necklace and showed that to Juno right before she stabbed her in the leg and left her for dead. Maybe they find that necklace. You can have little indications that we're in the same place, but we don't need to find Juno is now a cave creature. We don't need to find out it's like Sarah's long lost cousin needs to go find her 18 years later. They can have it tied together that way, but just make it more people going down in this fucked up cave and find new ways to scare. There's a version of that I could see them doing, and it could be done well.
Often sequels get it wrong because they're adding in like a family member or something like that. They're trying desperately to tie the two things together when really it's just the premises that what got everybody there in the first place. So I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, so you could do it. I would say there's a possibility you could do that. But I think we're both probably on the right track saying leave it alone, because I think this is a perfect horror film. And if you end it the way Neil Marshall wanted it to end, it's a great ending.
Perfect ending.
Yeah. I love this cat. This is turned into one of our favorite categories, but for this particular movie, I really like this cat. Can we survive this horror film? Now, first and foremost, you and I are not women spelunkers, so first off, we wouldn't be there. But again, we're playing hypotheticals where we basically inject ourselves into whatever horror film we're reviewing, and we ask the question, could we realistically survive this film? Patrick, I'm going to go first here. No, the fuck, I'm not surviving this film. Two things. First off, okay, here's how I survived this. You want to know how I survived this film? There is zero chance in hell you're getting me into a cave. That's my survival. But let's just play devil's advocate.
Right.
Okay, first off, I ain't making it through any of these tiny crabs. 6'3", over 200 pounds. I ain't fitting through shit. Okay, I'm not getting through any of these holes. I make holes. Okay, I do not climb through currently existing ones. I'm like the Kool-Aid man when I walk in the room. Like, like I burst through walls. I'm a big dude. Okay, so I ain't making it through any of those caverns. I definitely am not climbing over. Like, you put me on one of those hooks over that cavern, I'm falling right to the fucking floor. Like, I'm too big for this shit. So I'm not even getting to the creatures. The creatures will have no feast on me. I'll be dead 10 minutes earlier.
Damon got stuck on the crawl part and just died there. Never knew that there was cave monsters. Never knew that any of that shit went down. It's like the cave-in part when they're like, Sarah, you got to move. They would just be stuck because I'd be dead in the tunnel and they couldn't get me out of there. I'd be like a beached whale in there. Or like I said, get me to the cave where you have to climb over where they do the zip line over. Yeah, I'd fall right to the bottom. Right. Yeah.
None of that's holding me. Like over 120 pounds, you're going down. I'm dead.
You would have never made it to the real horror of the movie.
No. 100% I'm dead long before that.
I'm definitely a bit of an adventurer myself, and I love to try new things. I am a bit of an experience junkie. I'm not an extreme sports junkie by any stretch. And I certainly am more risk averse these days because I got kids. But I am I was just in a cave in April. In April, I went to Iceland. The first thing I did when I got off the fucking plane was drove a couple hours to a cave and went into a cave and literally got deep in enough that when we shut all our lights off, there was no discernible light anywhere. I've gotten the experience. I'm certainly the kind of person you can drag into this situation somehow. But I like to prepare. I'm a producer, so like I think about like all the possible scenarios that need to be done. And I'd just be like, I'm sorry, I already looked at all the maps, Juno. This isn't the correct way. Where are we going? I would have brought it up, but I would have ruined the movie, Damon. And I'd be like, oh no, we don't go this way because it's unmapped. I'm not going this way. So fuck right off, everybody. I'm going back that way. You go through that little slot right there and you have your fun. I know where you guys are. I'll be hanging out at the car on my phone and let me know when everything's done. Like that's literally how it would go because I'm not going to fuck with your unplanned situation. And in that respect, I do survive the horror film. Now, okay, if I am dumb enough to go with Juno's plan in this instance, because it's just so against how my brain works, but I'm a fighter. I'm a trained fighter. I'm down to fucking get funky. Like I just am. Like, okay, cool. We get to start killing people. Okay, they're not really people, or they're like some weird evolved bat version of us, and they're trying to attack us. Okay, I can get down on that. But I'm not making it out of the cave. I'm Neil Marshall's original ending. There's no real way out. So no, I don't survive the horror film.
Like I enjoy camping. Like I like camping. I've done camping a lot in my life, so I'm a little bit of an outdoor. Like I admit I'm a city boy, but I do like doing a little bit outdoors. When like I've camped, when we went on vacation, my senior year of high school, going into my freshman year of college, I did a 2-week camping trip with my best friend's family. And we went to like Wyoming, North Dakota, and we were all in like camping. Like we were all in camping situations, no hotels, none of that shit. So I like camping. I've done wilderness camping before, not like extreme wilderness, but like, wilderness camping. Even when I was out in like the safest area of Ohio in the wilderness, I always take a weapon with me. Maybe that's just my own like paranoia, but I always take like a knife. I'm not talking about like the knife you take like to, carve off shavings to start a fire. Like I'm taking like a full on knife. If something comes at me, you're getting stabbed kind of thing. My initial thought when they go down there, I was like, listen, I understand you're in a cave and you're in darkness and you got to take a limited amount of stuff you have with you. And you're basically going down there with things you need to survive and climb through a cave. In the back of my head, my first thought is like, I would still have some sort of weapon. Like I ain't going nowhere without something on me. Like I'm not taking a gun necessarily, but like
you get a knife or something.
So yeah, that was my first thought. So like that's the only way I could see myself if I did, somehow fit through all the little nooks and crannies that I wouldn't actually fit through. I would still probably die, but I guarantee I'd take a couple of those fuckers with me. You know what I mean? I'd have a knife or something with me, but yeah, I'm not even making it that far. I'm the guy who gets you trapped down there because I can't fit through the shit.
I just don't see you and me going on a caving expedition anytime soon.
No, there's not cords that can hold my big ass. Like they'd be like, dude, we can't just Spelunking. You just fall to the bottom. Like, yeah, I probably would. Like, you have the tensile strength to hold up a ship. That's what you need from me. Yeah, I'm not making it.
It's not necessarily a big dude sport.
No. Do you have the wire that you use to hold up bridges? Yeah, that's the wire.
Oh, come on.
The wire I need to climb down in this cave. Yeah, so it's like the scene in Jaws when he's like, "You think this just bit through the piano wire? Like you need big ass piano wire to lower me."
Come on.
Patrick, our last category. We've already answered this question, but let's just go ahead and throw it out there anyways, which is it scary? So when you take a look at The Descent, Patrick, is it scary? After all this, is it scary?
Damon, you claimed it one of the scariest. So it certainly must be scary. But truth be told, it just has all the elements you need. Stress-inducing, dread-inducing, blood, guts, gore, killing, and just general frights, creature, jump scares, everything you want in a scary movie is in this movie. It's in if you are compiling a list of movies that can scare you, The Descent must be on it. I don't care where, but it must be on your list. It just must be. It is a guaranteed scary movie.
As I said earlier, and I really do mean this, it is my definition of a perfect horror film. It's got a good story, compelling characters, interesting characters. Story's good enough to keep you going. You understand the driving factor behind everybody in this movie. You understand the emotions of this movie. It's anxiety inducing. It's a hour and a half panic attack, and then you add in cave dwelling creatures coming to kill you, which adds a whole other layer. Jump scares, gore. Again, I keep saying this and I mean it, it's the perfect horror film. Like, I'm not saying it's the best horror film ever made. I'm saying it's a perfect horror film. It is, like some people are like, well, I like this kind of horror film, like that kind of, like, this is the kind of horror film that should scare everybody. And if it doesn't scare you, you're probably lying because it's got everything. It's got the anxiety inducing scenes. It's got the jump scares. It's got the creatures. If one thing doesn't get you, something else will. Like I said, that scene in the tunnel, I've seen it 12 times, whatever it is. Every time I see it, it still stresses me out when she's climbing through that little ass tunnel. That's a scare.
Yeah.
That's a scare, and again, everything is. So yeah, this is, as I said, one of the scariest films ever. I don't know the rating. I don't know the number I'd put next to it. Like, is it number 1, number 5, number 8? It's one of the scariest movies ever made.
It's up there. Pack your underwear, or don't, I guess, because you'll be so very puckered up that maybe you can go commando on this one.
I am curious enough at some point. I feel like I'm gonna watch the sequel just out of curiosity. Like, I'm curious, like, if it's really, I know people for it, and I do know the premise kind of, but again, I don't know. I know there's no way it's as good as the original, but I am kind of curious.
I can tell you nobody talks about the sequel. Let's put it that way. And it never comes up.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I guess that's, the nature of the beast with some of these films. Again, you mess with perfection. It's hard to, it's like, why would you even bother? So, all right, folks, that is our episode this week, The Descent. It is amazing. Did you catch it on streaming? Because I watched it on Blu-ray. I have a Blu-ray of it.
I watched it on HBO Max, or Max, if you will.
Yeah, I knew it was on there. I knew it was on there last month, so it's still on there. So Max has it. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Catch it on. I think it has both of them, actually. I think it has a sequel too.
It might, yeah.
Yeah. So go catch it. Go stream it. At this point, I would hope you've seen it, or you're just ready to be terrified by listening to us talk about it for the last however long. Obviously, we appreciate everyone that tunes in each and every week to the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, over on our YouTube channel. If you want to see our reactions and how scared we truly are by this film, you can go over to YouTube and see everything in person with me and Patrick reacting to this movie. If you got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, movies that give you a pucker factor of 10, please reach out and tell us. You can send us an email. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's livingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on all of our social media channels. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on Twitter, X, on Facebook, and on Instagram. We are over on all these social media channels, so do not hesitate to reach out to us there. We love hearing from you guys. And we are also on our own social media channels. You can find me at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in each and every week to Rewind of the Living Dead. We'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.